What's up my friends, welcome back to the channel. Party season is knocking at the door, and if you're known for making cocktails, chances are you're gonna be behind the bar or behind the counter making drinks for your Christmas gatherings this year. So today I want to share with you some of my favorite tips and tricks so you can make the most out of it, to make sure you don't forget anything, and most importantly, to make sure you're still gonna have fun even though you're working for Christmas this year. So without further ado, if you guys are ready, let's get ready to party. Let's go. Before we get into the thick of it with some pre-batch cocktail recipes, let's talk about some of my favorite tips to make sure you've got everything covered when you're hosting a cocktail night. Number 1, prepare your glassware. This one is very simple, but at the same time extremely important. Always make sure you have enough glassware cleaned, polished, and ready to go before your guests arrive. And bonus point if you can chill them in advance. My tip number 2 now, always make sure you have enough garnishes. For this one, I like to make some kind of a garnish station with lots of citruses, herbs, spices, and other botanicals, so my friends can add the final touch to their cocktails. I think this works especially nicely with a gin and tonic station, so next to your garnishes you can add your selection of gin and other mixers that you may have, like a different selection of tonics, so your friends can make their own gin and tonic. I think it's really fun, and also it will offload some of the work for you. Now for spirit-forward cocktails that are usually garnished with citrus zest, I prefer to use my citrus aroma. This is a great way to reduce wastage because as you don't know exactly how many zest you're gonna need, chances are if you want to be ready, you're gonna prepare a lot of them in advance. You gotta store your zested citruses in your fridge, and most of the time when you do that, you just forget about them, you don't juice them, and eventually they finish in the garbage bin. So this is a great way to avoid that. It's also kind of shelf stable, so you can make a lot of it, and you can also make lots of different ones. You can make orange, lemon, lime, and even with some spices. It's pretty easy to do and also quite cost efficient, so if you want to know how to make this, I'm gonna link the video up here. Number 3 is something I love to do when I'm making old fashions for my cocktail parties, is to have a selection of different tinctures to flavor my old fashioned, so that way I can prep a big batch of regular old fashioned and let my guests decide how they want to flavor it. You can make a cinnamon tincture, a cardamom tincture, a spicy tincture, all sorts of different ones, and that way only by adding 1 or 2 dashes of it in your glass before pouring your pre-batched old-fashioned, you're gonna create a whole new cocktail. So this is a great way to reduce your mise en place while still having a wide selection of possibilities for your guests. I think it is really nice. Now for tip number 4, and this one is huge. You always need to make sure to have enough ice. It's the absolute worst when you start the night with gorgeous cocktails, complete with a beautiful piece of KLARIS, and end it with neat old fashions just because you ran out. So obviously you can make your own ice, cut it, and batch it in advance, but making cocktails for a cocktail party is already a lot of work, so this is when having an ice machine like the KLARIS, which is the sponsor of today's episode, comes in really handy. I've been using my KLARIS machine for a year and a half now to make my clear ice at home, and let me tell you, it is a game changer. You can run up to 2 batches a day, and each batch makes 4 cubes of 2 inches by 2 inches. So if you want to prepare for a cocktail party, in 5 days you can store up to 40 cubes in your freezer, which should be enough for at least 12 people. To make a batch, all you need is to add your inserts in the tray, which will allow for an easier unmolding, fill it up with water, and tap water is fine, all the way up to the line. Then what I like to do is to tap a little bit on the inserts with a bar spoon, for example, to make sure the inserts are perfectly placed. And before putting the tray back into the machine, I like to make sure it's dry on the outside. That way it's just gonna be easier to take the tray out when the batch is ready. So then you simply place the tray in the machine, close the lid, press the button, and let the machine works its magic. When the batch is ready, the machine's gonna let you know with a little bleep, and then it's gonna hold on the ice for you for about 5 hours. So you don't have to be there next to the machine waiting for the batch to be ready. You can simply get back to it later, hours later, and the ice is still going to be in perfect condition. But when you are ready and want to unmold your batch of clear ice, all you have to do is to stop the machine, open the lid, take the tray out, and there's always going to be some excess water. That's totally normal. You just dump it out and then leave the ice resting at room temperature for about 10 minutes. It's just going to make it much easier to unmold. So after a couple of minutes, you just flip it upside down and simply press a little bit on each cubes to take them out. Then you remove the inserts, place your cubes in your storage tray, which comes with the machine, store them in the freezer, and this is how you make a batch of clear ice with your KLARIS machine. You also have two different options for the shape of the ice. So you have the classic tray that makes 4 2 inches by 2 inches ice cubes, and you have the Collins tray that makes 3 large spheres of clear ice for your highballs or tall drinks. On the website, they also offer that in bundles. They have different options. So I'm gonna leave all the information in the description and pinned comment down below, along with my promo code, which is gonna give you an extra 10% discount that will stack up with the other promotions they may have. Speaking of which, up until the 16th of December, they're running an exclusive offer for the holidays called the 12 Days of KLARIS with a purchase of an ice maker. So again, I'm gonna put all the information in the description below, but now let's go make a freezer door and a pre-batch cocktail, both served on the rocks, obviously, with some beautiful clear ice. So first let's make a freezer door cocktail, a pre-batch cocktail placed in the freezer, ready to enjoy whenever you want. This is a technique that works best with spirit-forward cocktails because in order to keep it from freezing, you need a certain ABV, which is usually above 30%, and this is kind of hard to achieve with a cocktail that has juice in it. If you want to know all the details about how to make successfully a freezer door cocktail at home, like how much dilution you should add depending on the type of cocktail you're making, or what is bitter and sweetness expansion in a batch cocktail, I've already covered that before on the channel, so I'm going to link the video up here. I also shared before a cocktail ebook with about 20 different classic recipes with the dilution added and tweaked specs so it stays above a certain ABV so it doesn't freeze. So I think it can be very useful if you want to get into freezer door cocktails. All the calculations are already made. So I've put that on sale on my Patreon. So again, I'm going to link that in the description below. For today's freezer door cocktail, we're gonna make the Cock and Bull from Ted Saucier's book Bottoms Up. And again, the specs are slightly different from the book because we need to make some adjustments in order to keep a flavor balance when made in a bigger batch, and the dilution is calculated in order to keep it above 30% so it doesn't freeze. We're gonna make a batch for 7 servings today, which is gonna be perfectly fitting in a 700 ml bottle. But if you wanna make it slightly bigger, you know what to do. You multiply all the ingredients by the same ratio. So first, in a clean bottle, we're gonna add 315 ml of bourbon, 105 ml of cognac, 105 ml again of Benedictine, 50 ml of Cointreau, 5 ml of orange bitters, and then we're gonna add 120 ml of water for the dilution. Give it a quick shake to combine all the ingredients and then place it in the freezer until your guests arrive. I don't know if you can see it, it's probably a little bit hard for you to see, but the cocktail in the bottle is perfectly liquid. There's no crystal of ice at all. So that means that we nailed the dilution. Let's say you don't nail it perfectly. You add a little bit too much of water. It's gonna make some kind of a slosh in your bottle when you keep it in the freezer. And if it ever happens to you, don't panic. It's not a huge problem. That just means that you will have to take the bottle out from the freezer about 30 minutes before serving it. Speaking of which, let's add a beautiful KLARIS cube in an old-fashioned glass. Pour 2.5 ounces of the freezer door cocktail over it and garnish with a couple of spritz of my orange aroma. And there have it, a perfect freezer door Cock and Bull with some KLARIS ice. Cheers. Besides the fact that the flavor of this drink is outstanding, it's kind of an old-fashioned with a lot of warmth, complexity, and herbaceousness, it's also perfect straight from the bottle. The dilution is spot on, so it's not too hot on the first sip, but it's still a little bit strong. But because we served it over ice, it's gonna mellow out over time, which is gonna make it perfect from the first till the last sip. Also, the temperature makes a huge difference. Because we kept it in the freezer, the temperature being so low, it kind of thickens the mouthfeel and it adds a lot of texture, which is really nice. So a freezer door cocktail, when made correctly, is fantastic. But now, like I told you, this is not suited for all styles of cocktails. If you want to have something that's more refreshing, it's not gonna work. So let's talk about that. When we're talking about pre-batch cocktails that are on the refreshing side, that usually means that we will need some fresh ingredients and juices, and those ingredients are notorious for reacting poorly over time. They will do what we call oxidize, and oxidation, when we talk about fresh food, is what happens when the food gets in contact with oxygen. This changes the flavor profile of the ingredient and also most of the time its color, and it starts to taste like rust in no time, which is really bad when we talk about food. But there are some ways around that, and one of the easiest one is to use acid alternatives instead of fresh juice for our acidity. You can also use alternatives for your flavor components like syrups or liqueurs instead of fresh ingredients, and when you combine that to your acid alternatives, you get a great recipe for pre-batch cocktails that will last over time. So let's put that in action today with a Campari spiked pre-batched Paloma. The goal here is to get rid of the fresh lime and grapefruit without compromising on the freshness of the end result. So our key ingredient in this recipe is going to be an acid-adjusted grapefruit super juice, which is shelf-stable and also tastes like the real deal. This recipe is inspired by Brian Tasher's recipe, which is a new way to make super juice and, in my opinion, superior to the original way to make it. The taste is better, the mouthfeel is better, and the shelf life is longer, so I love it. Full disclosure, this is not exactly his recipe because I don't think he's covered grapefruit super juice, and because I wanted the acidity of lime, what I did is I took his lime super juice, applied it to grapefruit flavor, and added one little ingredient to get closer to the natural flavor profile of grapefruit juice. So to make it, it's very simple actually. First, what you're gonna do is weigh 15 grams of grapefruit peel, making sure to remove all the excess pith. Add that to a container, along with 15 grams of sugar, 12 grams of citric acid, 6 grams of malic acid, 0.5 grams of sea salt, and 0.2 grams of MSG. Then you're gonna close the lid, give it a quick shake to make sure the peels are well coated with the dry ingredients, and leave that resting at room temperature for 2 hours. This will leave enough time for the acid and sugar to extract the natural oils from the grapefruit peels. Then you're gonna add 250 ml of filtered water, and then you're gonna blend it briefly for about 5 seconds, and make sure not to overblend it because it's gonna start to taste overly bitter. Then you're simply gonna fine strain this through a couple of layers of cheesecloth while bottling it up. So this acid-adjusted grapefruit super juice has the same level of acidity than lime juice, but it's packed with grapefruit flavor. So you can totally use it in whatever cocktail that you want that would beneficiate from the lime acidity and grapefruit flavor. But today, I'm gonna try it in our Campari spiked pre-batched Paloma. This recipe is gonna be good for 6 servings, and we're gonna start in a bottle with 250 ml of Blanco tequila, 120 ml of mezcal, 90 ml of Campari, 90 ml of agave nectar, straight from the bottle, not diluted into a syrup, and finally 175 ml of our acid-adjusted grapefruit juice. Again, close, mix to combine, and place this in the fridge until you're ready. You probably noticed that we didn't add any dilution to this batch, and that's because we'll be topping it with sparkling water at the moment of serving. So this will leave more room for the sparkling water, preserving as much as possible its carbonation. And now to build the cocktail, we're gonna start by dusting a little bit of smoked paprika on the outside of a beautiful Collins glass, and this is also something I recommend you prep ahead of time. It's gonna save you a lot of hassle when it's gonna be the time of serving. Next, we're gonna add a beautiful clear ice spear that we made with our KLARIS ice maker. Then we're gonna pour in our glass 120 ml or 4 ounces of our pre-batch cocktail. And then we simply have to top it up with sparkling water. I like to give it a quick stir with a bar spoon to combine all the ingredients. And there have it, a pre-batched Campari spiked Paloma. Cheers. The Campari and the grapefruit flavor is just a match made in heaven. It really tastes like a good Paloma with a little bit of bitterness. The color is awesome. The smokiness from the mezcal and the smoked paprika as well just enhance the experience. I really like this cocktail, and I hope you're gonna love it too. So my friends, this is it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, KLARIS, for sponsoring this episode. And at home, if you want to please yourself with a beautiful and super useful KLARIS ice maker, don't forget the link in the description and pinned comment below. And mostly, don't forget my promo code to save an extra 10%. So once again, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day and see you very soon. Cheers.